this is how it was. She stayed with Richard for 14 years, but a man has to fail a lot before he can succeed. It wasn't like that for his wife at first. They met at the bottom of the heap. The locals would hate his burritos as much as they disliked him as a person. That's where his relationship with his wife began. But his mother didn't change his lunch because of the ostracism. Instead, she gave him 2 burritos. At school, he was insulted as expected, but when it came to these people, he actually did.
Oh my God, so good.
Fatty disgustedly pushed his brother in front of him. He could only take a bite, but he was instantly overwhelmed by the flavor. Seeing his brother's satisfied face, Fatty reached for another burrito.
25 cents.
And that's how he got out of it, and sold the burrito, and it was never the same again. The legend of the tasty burrito took off at school. As more and more burritos were brought to school, Richard's piggy bank got fuller and fuller, but it all came to a head with one decision. Buying a chocolate for his wife was mistaken for stealing money. The police wouldn't give him a chance to explain. Richard was on the road to crime before he finished primary school. Every day, he fights the police to stay alive. The couple spent years on the streets, until one day, the woman looked at her growing belly and realized. She told Richard that he had to change. But was it really that easy to give up the easy life? Richard wondered. He looked at his wife sleeping peacefully in the room. He made his choice with his actions. But until the birth of their second child, their life was still a struggle. The youngest son's milk had to be mixed with tap water. The oldest son's shoes got gummed up. He could only get gum on them. Even the wife had to stand on the street with the baby in her arms to sell things. But even so, her wife managed to keep a smile on her face, encouraged Richard to continue to change, and he was happy to apply for jobs every day. But because of his low education and criminal record, no one even wanted him for hard labor. He went to see his former gang leader, but he's got a grudge against him for leaving. But after Richard begged and pleaded with him, he was impressed by the man's determination to change, so he agreed to help Richard find a job. It was this job that would change Richard's life. Looking at the application form, it was hard to believe that this was just a job as a cleaner. But Richard was afraid to fill it in. His qualifications were the obstacle. With great trepidation, he took the application form home with him. Looking at Richard with self-deprecation, his wife patiently helped him fill out his CV. But what about the interview? Richard talked a lot of nonsense. The interviewer soon found out about the fake degree, but Richard didn't want to let his wife down again. Once again, he gave away his self-respect.
Look, maybe I don't got no diploma, but I got a PhD. I'm poor, hungry, and determined, sir.
For a grown man to say something like that, the interviewer gave him a chance. His wife was happier than he was. The cleaner at Vittoria's. It was Richard's first legal job as an adult. He made a happy promise. He was going to be the best cleaner he could be. Even though there were only 2 people in the department, he continued to work hard. He was always the first to do the dirty work. As the job became more stable, Richard became interested in the machinery of the factory. He asked his boss for advice. When Richard says hello, the engineer replied politely. But when he asked how the machine worked, the engineer's face changed, fearing that he might lose his job. He took Richard away. At dinner, a colleague taught him about the workplace. Factories have strict hierarchies. You can see it at the dinner table. The one sitting at the front is the factory manager. They live in wealth and security, and they have pensions. Then the floor managers. No job security, but they have all the responsibility. And then these engineers. They're arrogant because of their skills, but everyone had to respect them. The best of them was Clarence. He worked hard every day to get to the manager's desk, but he's been doing it for 15 years. And all these people were fighting for him, because he taught a lot of the managers. That's why Clarence doesn't like to be asked about the mechanics. Richard, the bottom caretaker, couldn't talk to his bosses, but Richard didn't want to keep mopping the floor. He wanted to work his way up to the top. With a vision, he had a trick up his sleeve, the burrito that conquered his school as a child, and Clarence was attracted to the flavor. He managed to sit across from him. From then on, he was always behind Clarence, and he was able to spot the problem and warn him in time. Looking at the battered chips, Richard wondered if the oil was too hot, but Clarence wasn't surprised. He said the brown ones would be thrown away. They were standing at the top of the factory. Clarence told him he could tell if a machine was working by the sound of it, or even if a screw was loose. But Richard tried. It didn't work.
Oh, you will when I'm done with you. You ain't a nobody, son.
That would mean he was officially Clarence's pupil. Richard is a caretaker, but he's been voted the best employee in the factory. But just when things were going well, fate began to play a trick on him. As the economy declined, the factory's orders plummeted. Many employees were laid off. Richard's dreams of promotion were shattered. The factory was struggling to stay afloat. 8 years later, he's still doing the same job. So sometimes our failures aren't due to lack of effort. The fight for snacks is getting worse. The market share was shrinking. The president of the company made a decision to reduce unnecessary expenses, to close down some of the factories. Those at the bottom of the ladder will be the direct victims. It's not just their jobs they'll lose, it's the security of their families. The president decided to speak to the employees on the job, but when the video was released, Richard was the only one who watched it. He wanted every employee to think like the president, but it was this video. A lot of people didn't care, but what gave Richard renewed hope? It's the constant thinking that he was on the verge of the perfect opportunity to save the factory and make something of himself. Just eating a piece of cheap corn, he found a way to make money. His son's mouth was hanging open from the roasted corn.
What is it?
It burns.
Well, stop eating it, dummy.
No, I like it. It what's good.
But he said he loved it. It's the spicy flavor that keeps him going. Richard realized they all like spicy food. It doesn't matter what the food is. It's the squeeze of hot sauce that gets the taste buds going. He was going to become a millionaire by making chili chips. Richard immediately bought a couple of bags of chips and went home. But his wife is worried about the cost of living this month.
And while you do that, Rich, how do we pay rent? Huh? How do we buy food? How do we survive?
She spent half her life with a man who has nothing. Is there really a chance? She couldn't bear to discourage her husband. She decided to go crazy with him one more time. They immediately purchased a variety of chilies and started testing them. The wife took the lead, but the salsa at the beginning made them very hot. But it wasn't the same kind of spiciness as roasted corn. The company was making salsa, too. It's just technology. But Richard believed only vegetables grown on the land, with their traditional production methods, to create the spicy flavor that's in their bones. In order to succeed, the family tried every chili they could get their hands on. But how do you get the right amount of chili? He built a wheel like a factory roller. At last, the chili, which carried their hopes and hopes, was served to their son.
For good or for bad?
It was good.
Oh! Oh, yeah! Yeah!
Of course we did.
The sauce was a success, but the factory started laying off a lot of workers. The supervisor wouldn't listen to him. He even mocked him. It takes years to develop a new product, and costs millions of dollars. What are you dreaming about cleaning toilets? It wouldn't be in his character to give up. Richard slipped into his office. He found the number for the head office. He called the CEO directly from abroad. He was confronted by the secretary. He said he was a technician in the cleaning department. Isn't that still a cleaner? Luckily, the secretary decided to transfer the call to the president. This is a call between the lowest level of society and the highest level of the world. He was nervous. The president was also confused, until this sentence.
And you said in the video, think like a CEO. So I did.
That's when the president was interested enough.
You saw my video?
Yes, sir.
And you're a janitor.
Maintenance crew, sir. Look, if it's okay, I'd like to send you some samples, sir.
Richard, that's more than okay with me.
More than okay. Thank you, sir.
He managed to convince him to get the address. He and his wife mailed out the samples with trepidation and dignity. The billionaire CEO didn't know what to expect.
Holy hotness! Mama hot! Patty! Water! Oh.
It's strange. Why is he so hot and hungry? Then Richard received a phone call. It's the CEO who's been spiced up. All he could think about was Richard's suggestion. He decided to visit the factory and meet Richard in person. The factory executives couldn't sit still, from the factory manager down. Every department was trying to find out who had alerted the president. It was only when the head of the department realized it was Richard. He criticized him directly. If the president didn't take his advice, and found that the plant continued to lose money, he would have pulled his investment, and closed the factory, and Richard would be the one to lose his job. Now Richard is beginning to question his decision. He couldn't afford it. When he returned home, his wife noticed his mood. When she realized why, she told Richard to look in the mirror and said she'd been with him half her life, because she expected him to see her gifts and talents, so that he wouldn't deny himself, that she'd always be there for him in everything. And her wife read and learnt a lot about business with him. She gave him speechwriters, taught him how to speak to people at the top. On the day of the president's visit, her wife picked out a tie for him that she normally wouldn't buy. She said he was now the most handsome man in the world. I envy him for having a good wife.
You're the best person I know.
Who, me?
There's no me without you. Thank you for believing in me, Mirena.
When the president's car arrived at the factory, the moment of destiny had finally arrived. He didn't want to listen to these people. He just wanted to see Richard. You'd think that's the way it would go. Everyone thought he was a hero. Could he walk up to the president and introduce himself? That's the reality. Walking through the crowd, too busy to say hello. The president's time is limited. Tell him to present his plan. But he hadn't graduated from primary school. The professional words on the script. He couldn't express his true thoughts. He simply threw away the script, turn on the light and improvise. But someone would always stop him. The shareholders asked what the market share was. What's market share? He had no idea what the word meant in his head. Thinking of the products on the shelves, he put it in his own words.
This much this much market share.
The executives laughed at him. Then he took on the role of an underclassman. He told them about the huge market for this product. The president stood up and spread his arms out like he did. He asked the executives if they knew what the share was. He thanked Richard for giving him a lot to think about. Despite the opposition of the shareholders, he invested in the product. Soon enough, spicy chips were added to the line, but customers weren't buying. The chips became a shelf stealer. The shareholders had a good reason to stop production. They told him it was time to wake up. Richard was devastated. He had to realize he was giving up, but his master didn't think it was what he wanted.
Did this place stop you for having the balls to pick up the phone and call Roger and Rico?
Yeah, but then I embarrassed myself.
Embarrassment's never stopped you before? Ask questions. You wore my ass out with them. Look here, the person I met 10 years ago wouldn't blink. He'd find a way, any way to get it done. I don't want to look you up in 20 years from now, just to find out you're still down here on the bottom.
Richard didn't know what the problem was, but from what his son told him, the people in charge didn't advertise this product. People didn't even know it existed. He took the money he had saved for dinner and asked his father to advertise it. The hearts of the family are all together. What's to stop him from succeeding? Richard was inspired. He found his former companions. These men were now idle, but they could sell shampoo to a bald man. Then they all went to the factory. Richard started to mobilize the staff again. Anyone who tries to stop them, they'd get in the way. Someone taunts Richard, and the master would shut him up. At that moment, he was the leader of the group. Like a leader, he inspired them. After convincing most of them, they took the chips out of the factory and loaded them into their cars. Everyone did their job. His wife gave them to the neighbors, sons to their classmates, his mates to the youngsters. Richard delivered them wherever he went. They even pretended to be passers-by buying empty shelves. This instantly aroused the curiosity of the customers. Richard took the opportunity to sell. It was a crowd effect. At one point, the chili chips were sold out. When the sales report arrived at the office, the shareholder who despised the caretaker didn't invest.
You still think I'm investing in the janitor? I'm investing in a vision. The Hispanic market is the future, and this man is going to lead us there.
The president called Richard again. He wanted to increase production, and this time, the target was 5 million cases. All the production lines in the factory started at the same time. The chips are tumbling in huge drums. It's not just a snack anymore. It carries the dreams of everyone, including Richard. How many families will it support? The factory that once faced closure recalled unemployed workers overnight. It's no exaggeration. The machines were going up in smoke. 6 months later, the factory had surpassed its peak. He was approached by a blue-collar master and reintroduced himself.
Now looking at the new plant manager in Bakersfield.
Happy for him, Richard wondered if he'd been promoted. When he found out he was still a caretaker, anyone would have been disappointed. He wasn't greedy, he just wanted to be a mechanic. When he came to the first floor to mop the floor, he found the CEO waiting in front of one of the offices. He told Richard he was a child of humble beginnings, and it was because he had a dream that he became successful. He believes that dreamers can't be tied down. Smart people don't want to be tied down, and smarter people like him invest in their dreams. He formally invited Richard to join them. With his golden business card in the doorframe, Richard became the marketing director.
For real?
Downstairs, there was a long-awaited round of applause. He was sitting in his own office. After a brief moment to compose himself, he called his wife first.
Hey, Jude, it's me.
Okay, what's up?
We're gonna need more ties.
I'm so proud of you.